She told him her name was Maya, and that was the first lie. The second was that she had come to Guadalajara for the architecture. The third was that meeting him had been an accident. By the time she realized love could be a lie too, one you tell yourself until it becomes the only truth that matters, it was far too late to walk away. Some betrayals are chosen. Others grow slowly in the dark, roots winding around your ribs until you can't tell where the mission ends and your heart begins. The cafe where they first spoke sat in the shadow of the Templo Expiatorio, all Gothic spires and stained glass catching the amber light of late afternoon. Maya had been there 3 days in a row, laptop open, appearing to work on something vaguely academic. Translation services, she would say if anyone asked. Freelance. It gave her a reason to be everywhere and nowhere, to ask questions that seemed innocent, to linger in spaces where she didn't quite belong. She had watched him twice before he noticed her. The first time, he had been alone at a corner table, reading a newspaper. The actual paper kind, folded deliberately. His coffee untouched and cooling. The second time, 2 men had sat with him, their voices too low to hear, their postures rigid with something that looked like respect but felt more like fear. When they left, he stayed. He always stayed longer than anyone else, as if the cafe were the only place he could breathe. The third day he looked up. Their eyes met for less than a second, but it was enough. Enough for him to see her. Enough for her to feel seen, which was dangerous, because being noticed meant being remembered, and being remembered meant complications she couldn't afford. But she smiled anyway. Uncertain. The kind of smile that said she wasn't sure if she should. He didn't smile back. He simply held her gaze, then returned to his paper as if she had been nothing more than a passing thought. But 10 minutes later, when he stood to leave, he paused beside her table. "You've been here before," he said. Not a question. His voice was quieter than she expected. Measured. There was no threat in it, but there was weight, the kind that made her aware of every word she was about to say. "I like the light," she said, gesturing toward the window. "Good for working." He glanced at her laptop screen, though she had been careful to keep it angled away. "What do you work on?" "Translations. English to Spanish, mostly. Some Portuguese." "You're American." "I am. Guadalajara is far from home." She shrugged. "Easy, practiced. So is everywhere if you're not ready to stay still." Something flickered in his expression. Recognition, maybe, or understanding. He nodded once, a small movement, and walked away without another word. She exhaled slowly, pulse thudding in her ears. That was the beginning. His name was Mateo Ibarra, though no one called him that to his face. Those who worked for him called him Chief or said nothing at all. Those who feared him didn't say his name in public. She had learned this in the first week, before she ever saw him in person, when the name appeared in her briefing file alongside a photograph that didn't do justice to the way he looked at people, like he could see through skin and bone to whatever truth they were hiding. "Observe only," her handler had said. A man named Carver. All business and clipped syllables over encrypted calls. "We don't need you to get close. We need you to be invisible. Watch his routines. Who he meets. Where he goes when he thinks no one's looking. You're a pair of eyes, nothing more." But invisibility only worked until someone decided to look. She saw him again 4 days later at a charity gala held in a restored hacienda on the city's edge. All terracotta and bougainvillea and old money pretending to care about new causes. She hadn't expected him to be there. Men like him didn't usually show their faces at events where cameras were encouraged. But there he was, standing near the back of the courtyard in a black suit that looked like it cost more than her cover story could afford, a glass of wine in his hand that he wasn't drinking. She had been invited through a contact, a woman named Lucia who ran a non-profit and asked too few questions about why an American translator wanted to attend fundraisers for housing initiatives in Jalisco. Maya had worn a simple dress, black, forgettable, and had planned to stay an hour at most. Then Mateo looked across the courtyard and saw her. This time he did approach. "The translator," he said, stopping a few feet away. Not close enough to crowd her, but close enough that she could smell his cologne, something woodsy and faint like cedar after rain. Maya, she said, offering her name like it was the truth. Mateo. She already knew. But she let her expression show polite interest, nothing more. You don't seem like someone who enjoys these kinds of events. I don't. Then why come? He looked at her for a long moment, and she had the strange sense that he was deciding how much honesty to give her. Because sometimes being seen in the right place is more useful than being invisible in the wrong one. It was the kind of answer that meant nothing and everything. She smiled faintly. That sounds exhausting. It is. He tilted his head slightly, studying her. What about you? You don't seem like someone who enjoys these kinds of events either. I don't. Then why come? Because sometimes, she said slowly, being somewhere you don't want to be is better than staying somewhere you can't leave. His eyes narrowed just a fraction, and for a terrible second she thought she had said too much, revealed something real beneath the lie. But then his expression softened, almost imperceptibly, and he nodded. Yes, he said quietly. I understand that. They stood in silence for a while, surrounded by laughter and champagne flutes and people who performed wealth like a second language. Neither of them belonged there, and maybe that was why, when the evening ended, he asked if she needed a ride home. I can get a taxi, she said. I know. I'm offering anyway. She should have said no. Should have kept the distance Carver had insisted on. But something in his voice, something lonely, something careful, made her pause. All right, she said. His car was black, expensive, and quiet. The driver didn't ask questions. Mateo sat beside her in the back seat, not touching, not speaking, just existing in the same space. When they reached her apartment, a modest place in Americana, close enough to seem accessible, far enough to seem private, he walked her to the door. Thank you, she said. He nodded. Then, as if the word surprised even him, he said, I'd like to see you again. Her heart kicked hard against her ribs. Why? Because I think you're someone worth knowing. It was the most dangerous thing anyone had ever said to her. All right, she whispered. And just like that, the mission began to change. At first, she told herself it was strategic. That getting closer to him would yield better information. That trust was a currency she could spend. They met for coffee, then lunch, then long walks through the city's older neighborhoods, places where tourists didn't venture and locals still hung laundry from wrought iron balconies. He spoke little about himself, but he listened when she talked. Really listened, the way people rarely do, as if her words mattered more than whatever he was thinking. She lied constantly. About where she grew up. About why she traveled. About the work she did. But in between the lies, small truths slipped out. That she loved thunderstorms. That she missed her grandmother. That sometimes she felt like she was living someone else's life. He never pressed. Never asked for more than she offered. And somehow that made her want to give him everything. Carver called once a week, and every time the conversation grew shorter. What have you learned? He keeps regular hours. Meets with the same people. Nothing unusual. You need to get closer. Find out who supplies him. Where the money goes. I'm working on it. Work faster. But she didn't. She couldn't. Because every hour she spent with Mateo, the mission felt less like an assignment and more like a betrayal she hadn't committed yet. 6 weeks in, he invited her to his home. It wasn't what she expected. No fortress. No guards at the gate. Just a house in Zapopan, old and carefully maintained, surrounded by trees that muffled the noise of the street beyond. Inside it was quiet. Almost austere. Books on the shelves. Art on the walls, real art, not the kind bought for status. A life built carefully, privately, away from whatever he did in the shadows. You don't have to stay, he said as he poured her a glass of wine. I just thought you might be tired of cafes. She looked around the room, at the way the light fell through the windows, at the stillness that felt like safety. It's peaceful here. It's the only place that is. They sat on the couch, not touching, the space between them heavy with things neither of them knew how to say. She sipped her wine. He stared at his hands. Can I ask you something? she said quietly. Yes. Do people fear you? He didn't flinch. Didn't deflect. He simply looked at her and said, yes. Why? Because fear is easier than trust. And safer. For them or for you? He smiled, faint and sad. Both. She set down her glass. I don't fear you. Maybe you should. Why? Because everyone close to me ends up regretting it. The words hung in the air, fragile and true. She wanted to tell him that she understood. That she knew what it was like to live behind walls. That loneliness was a language she spoke fluently. Instead, she reached for his hand. He stiffened, surprised, but he didn't pull away. His fingers curled around hers, warm and careful, and for a long time they sat like that. Two people holding on to something they couldn't name, something that felt like hope and doom in equal measure. I won't regret it, she whispered. He looked at her, and in his eyes she saw belief. Fragile, desperate belief. It was the cruelest thing she had ever done. The guilt started small. A tightness in her chest when he smiled. A twist in her stomach when he said her name. But as the weeks became months, it grew into something monstrous. Something that sat on her ribs and made it hard to breathe. She stopped filing detailed reports. Gave Carver the bare minimum. He noticed. You're holding back. I'm not. Then prove it. Get us something actionable. He said she would. But she didn't. Because every time she tried, she saw Mateo's face. The way he looked at her like she was the one good thing in a world that had given him nothing but reasons to stay guarded. He told her things. Not about his work. He never spoke about that, but about himself. That his father had died when he was 12. That he had built everything from nothing. And that nothing was all he expected to return to. That he didn't sleep well. That he woke most nights at 3 a.m. and walked through his house like a ghost, touching the walls just to remember where he was. Do you ever wish you could leave? She asked one night, lying beside him in the dark. They had crossed that line weeks ago, and now the intimacy felt like a third presence in the room. Watching, waiting. Every day, he said. Then why don't you? Because leaving would mean admitting I failed. And I don't know how to do that. She turned to face him, their faces inches apart. What if failing was the bravest thing you could do? He touched her cheek, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. Then maybe I'm not brave. I think you are. You don't know me, Maya. The lie in her name felt like a blade. I know enough, she whispered. And God help her, she believed it. 3 months in, someone started watching her. She noticed it first in small ways. A car that appeared too often on her street, a man in a coffee shop who looked away too quickly when she glanced up. She told herself she was paranoid. That the guilt was making her see threats where there were none. But then Lucia called. Someone was asking about you, the woman said, her voice tight. A man. He wanted to know how we met. Why you were at the gala. Maya's blood went cold. What did you tell him? Nothing. But Maya, be careful. People talk. She hung up and sat very still, her mind racing. If Mateo's people were asking questions, it meant she had been careless. It meant someone suspected. It meant the clock was running out. She should have run. Should have called Carver, extracted herself, disappeared before everything collapsed. But that night, when Mateo came to her apartment with takeout and that quiet smile he saved only for her, she couldn't do it. You look worried, he said, setting the food on the counter. I'm fine. He studied her, unconvinced. Then he crossed the room and pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was something fragile he was afraid to break. Whatever it is, he murmured against her hair. You can tell me. She closed her eyes and held him tighter. I know, she lied. The breaking point came on a Thursday. Carver called. His voice colder than usual. We have a problem. What kind of problem? The kind where you've been made. Our intel says Ibarra's people are asking about you. We need to pull you out. Her heart stopped. When? Now. Tonight. Pack what you need and get to the safe house. We'll have you on a plane by morning. She couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. I need time. You don't have time. If they figure out who you are, you're dead. Do you understand that? Dead. She understood. But understanding didn't make it easier. I'll go, she said numbly. Good. Don't contact Ibarra. Don't say goodbye. Just disappear. The line went dead. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the wall, her mind blank with panic. She could leave. Should leave. It was the only rational choice. But then her phone buzzed. Mateo. Dinner tonight. I want to cook for you. Her hands shook as she typed a response. Maya, I'd like that. His house smelled like garlic and tomatoes, warmth spilling from the kitchen into the dim living room where she stood, frozen, trying to memorize the way the light looked, the way everything looked, because she knew this was the last time. You're quiet tonight, he said, glancing over his shoulder as he stirred something on the stove. Just tired. Then sit. I'll bring you wine. She sat. He brought her wine. They ate at the small table by the window, and he talked about a book he was reading, and she nodded in all the right places, but inside she was screaming. When the meal was finished, he reached across the table and took her hand. Maya, he said softly. What's wrong? Nothing. You're lying. She looked at him, and the truth rose in her throat like bile. She wanted to tell him everything. Wanted to break herself open and let him see the wreckage. But the words wouldn't come. I have to leave, she said finally. His expression didn't change, but something in his eyes went dark. When? Soon. Why? Because staying will hurt you. He let go of her hand, leaned back in his chair. You think leaving won't? I think leaving is the only way to keep you safe. He laughed, a bitter, broken sound. Safe. From what? From me. The silence that followed was unbearable. Then quietly he said, I know. Her blood turned to ice. What? I know you're not who you say you are. I've known for weeks. The world tilted. Mateo. I don't care what they sent you to do, he said. His voice steady despite the pain in his eyes. I don't care who you were before you walked into that cafe. All I care about is who you are when you're with me. Tears burned her eyes. You should care. You should hate me. I can't. Why? Because I love you. The words shattered her. She stood, stumbling back from the table, her chest heaving. You can't. You don't. I do. He stood too, closing the distance between them. And I think you love me too. That's why you're leaving. She couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. He was right. God, he was right. Stay, he said, his voice breaking. Please. Just stay. I can't. Why? Because loving you will destroy us both. He cupped her face in his hands, his thumb brushing away the tear that slid down her cheek. Then let it. She kissed him. Hard and desperate and full of every unsaid word, every unforgivable lie. He kissed her back like she was the only truth that mattered. And for one perfect, terrible moment, she let herself believe they could survive this. She left before dawn. No note. No goodbye. Just the weight of his warmth still on her skin and the sound of his breathing in the dark as she dressed and walked out the door. The safe house was cold. Me. Carver debriefed her over the phone. His voice devoid of sympathy. You did the right thing. She said nothing. We'll move on him soon. Your intel was useful. She hung up. For 3 days she stayed in that hollow room, staring at the walls, waiting for something. Grief, relief, anything to break through the numbness. But all she felt was the absence of him. The space where his voice had been. The phantom weight of his hand in hers. On the 4th day Lucia called. Maya, where are you? Are you safe? I'm fine. There was a raid. Last night. Mateo's house. They took him. The phone slipped from her hand. She found out later, through Carver's cold recitation of facts, that Mateo hadn't fought, hadn't run. He had simply let them take him, as if he had been waiting for it all along. He'll be extradited, Carver said. Tried in the States. A win. She thought about Mateo's face in the dark. The way he had said I love you like it was the only truth he had left. The way he had known, had always known, and had chosen her anyway. She had destroyed him. Not with information. Not with strategy. But with hope. With love. With the terrible selfish belief that maybe, just maybe, she could have both. She couldn't. 6 months later, she sat in a small apartment in a city she didn't know, watching rain streak down the window. The news played softly in the background. She didn't listen. Didn't care. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. But something, instinct, hope, masochism, made her pick up. Maya. Her heart stopped. Mateo. His voice was different. Tired. Hello. But it was him. They let me make one call, he said quietly. I wanted it to be you. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I know. I didn't want. I know. Silence stretched between them, vast and unbridgeable. Did you mean it? He asked finally. When you stayed that last night. Did you mean it? She closed her eyes. Yes. Good. He exhaled shaky. That's all I needed to know. Mateo. I have to go. Wait. I don't regret it, Maya. Loving you. I don't regret any of it. The line went dead. She sat in the dark, clutching the phone, sobbing until there was nothing left. Years passed. She moved. Changed her name again. Built a life that looked like peace but felt like penance. She never heard from him again. But sometimes, late at night, when the world was quiet and the walls pressed in, she would remember the way he had looked at her in that cafe. The way he had smiled in the kitchen. The way he had said I love you like it was a choice. And she would whisper into the dark, I'm sorry. Knowing he would never hear. Knowing it didn't matter. Because some betrayals can't be forgiven. And some loves can't be undone. She had been sent to destroy him. But in the end they had destroyed each other. And that, she thought, was the only honest thing she had ever done. The truth was Maya Jenkins, her real name, the one she had almost forgotten, didn't disappear after that phone call. She simply became very good at pretending she had. She moved to Portland first, then Austin, then finally to a small town in North Carolina where nobody asked questions and the past felt like something that had happened to someone else. She got a job teaching ESL at a community center. She rented a house with a porch. She adopted a cat that didn't like her very much but stayed anyway. She built a life that looked normal from the outside. But inside, she was still standing in Mateo's kitchen, watching the light change, knowing she was about to walk away from the only person who had ever seen her and chosen to stay. The guilt didn't fade. Metastasized. Became part of her cellular structure. She woke with it, ate with it, fell asleep to its steady, accusatory rhythm. And every night she dreamed of his hands. Carver had retired 6 months after the operation closed. She heard it through channels she probably shouldn't have still had access to. A brief, impersonal email from someone in the agency thanking her for her service and informing her that her handler was no longer active. No longer active was a polite way of saying he had taken his pension and his secrets and disappeared into whatever quiet life men like him built when the lying finally stopped. She wondered if he slept well. She wondered if he ever thought about Mateo Ibarra, rotting in a federal prison in California, serving a sentence that would outlive them all. She wondered if Carver had ever loved anyone enough to ruin them. Probably not. 2 years after the phone call, she broke her own rule and searched for him online. It was late. She had drunk half a bottle of wine and the silence in the house felt too large, too full of ghosts. Her hands shook as she typed his name into the search bar. The results were sparse. A few news articles from the trial. A photograph. His face stone still, expressionless, flanked by federal agents. He looked older, thinner. But his eyes were the same. Dark, steady, unreadable. She scrolled further and found a blog post from a prison reform advocate. It mentioned him briefly, listed him among other inmates serving life sentences for non-violent coordination offenses. The language was clinical. It didn't mention that he had once cooked dinner for a woman who was lying to him. That he had held her hand like it was something sacred. That he had known she was poison and swallowed it anyway. She closed the laptop and sat in the dark, her chest aching with something that felt like grief but had no end point, no resolution. She thought about writing him a letter. She thought about it for months. She never did. In the 3rd year she met someone. His name was David. He taught history at the local high school, wore sweaters with elbow patches, and had the kind of easy smile that made people feel safe. He asked her out for coffee, then dinner, then a walk by the river where he talked about his students and his book club and his golden retriever named Fitzgerald. He was kind, uncomplicated, the sort of person who believed people were generally good and the world generally made sense. She wanted to love him. She tried. They dated for 8 months. He was patient, thoughtful. He never pushed. When she woke gasping from nightmares she couldn't explain, he held her and asked no questions. When she went silent for days, retreating into herself, he gave her space and waited. "You're always somewhere else," he said one evening, sitting across from her at dinner. His expression sad but not angry. "I don't know where. But you're not here." She looked at him, this good gentle man who deserved someone whole, and felt nothing but tired. "I'm sorry," she said. "I know." He reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "I just wish I knew what you were running from." She almost told him. Almost let the whole rotten story spill out. The lies, the mission, the man in the prison who had loved her anyway. But the words stuck in her throat, sharp and immovable. "It's not you," she said quietly. "I know that too." They ended it kindly. He hugged her at the door and told her she deserved to be happy. She nodded and said nothing, because they both knew she didn't believe it. In the 4th year she got a phone call that changed everything. It was a Tuesday. Raining. She was grading papers at the kitchen table when her phone rang, an unknown number with a California area code. She almost didn't answer. But something made her pick up. "Is this Maya Jenkins?" The voice was female. Professional. Unfamiliar. "Yes. My name is Sharon Delgado. I'm an attorney. I represent Mateo Ibarra." The room tilted. "I what?" "Mr. Ibarra has made a request. He'd like to speak with you. I'm calling on his behalf to see if you'd be willing to accept a call from him." Maya's heart hammered against her ribs. "Why?" "I'm not at liberty to discuss the details." But he was very clear. "He'd like to speak with you. It would be a monitored call from the facility. You're under no obligation, of course. But if you're willing, I can arrange it." Maya opened her mouth, closed it, tried to breathe. "I need to think about it." "Of course. I'll call back in a week." The line went dead. Maya sat frozen, staring at her hands, her pulse roaring in her ears. "He wants to talk to you. After 4 years. After everything. Why?" She didn't sleep that night. Or the next. She paced her house like a ghost, her mind spinning through every possibility. Maybe he wanted closure. Maybe he wanted to scream at her. Maybe he wanted to tell her he hated her, that loving her had been the worst mistake of his life. Maybe he just wanted to hear her voice. She thought about refusing. About telling Sharon Delgado that it was too late, that there was nothing left to say. But when the attorney called back a week later, Maya heard herself say, "Yes. All right. I'll arrange it. You'll receive a call from the facility on Friday at 2 p.m. Do you have any questions?" None that mattered. "No." "Very well. Thank you, Ms. Jenkins." Friday arrived too fast and too slow. Maya called in sick to work. She cleaned her house. She sat on the couch and stared at her phone, her stomach twisted into knots. At exactly 2 p.m. it rang. She answered on the second ring. "This is a call from an inmate at a federal correctional facility. This call is being recorded and monitored. Press 1 to accept." She pressed 1. Silence. Then a click. "Maya." His voice hit her like a fist to the chest. "Mateo." She couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. 4 years collapsed into nothing. "You answered," he said quietly. "You called. I wasn't sure you would." She closed her eyes, tears already spilling. "I wasn't either." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was vast, full of everything they had lost. "How are you?" he asked finally. The question was so normal, so absurd that she almost laughed. "I don't know. How are you?" "Alive." It wasn't an answer. It was all the answer there was. "Mateo, her voice broke. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I know. I didn't want. I know. Then why did you call? Why now?" He exhaled slowly. "Because I'm dying." The world stopped. "What?" "Cancer. Pancreatic. They caught it late." His voice was calm. "Matter of fact. I have maybe 6 months. Maybe less." "No," the word came out strangled. "No, that's not. It is." She pressed her hand to her mouth, sobbing. "I didn't call to hurt you," he said gently. "I called because I wanted you to know. And because I wanted to tell you something." "What?" "I forgive you." The words shattered her. "You can't," she choked out. "You can't forgive me. I destroyed your life. You gave me the only thing in my life that felt real," he said quietly. "That mattered. I've had 4 years to hate you, to regret you, and I can't. I've tried. Mateo. I loved you, Maya. I still do. And I'm going to die loving you. That's the truth. The only one that matters." She couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe through the grief. "I don't expect anything from you," he continued. "I just wanted you to know. So you didn't spend the rest of your life carrying that guilt. I deserve to carry it. Maybe. But I don't want you to." She wept into the phone, her body shaking with sobs she had held back for years. "I loved you too," she whispered. "I still do. I never stopped. I know. It doesn't change anything." "No," he agreed softly. "But it matters anyway." They sat in silence, breathing together across 1,000 miles of distance and loss. "Can I call you again?" he asked. "Yes." "Good." "Mateo." "Yes." "I wish." She couldn't finish. There were too many wishes. All of them impossible. "Me too," he said. And then the line went dead. She called him every week after that. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they just sat in silence, the phone pressed to their ears, breathing in tandem. He told her about the prison, the routines, the monotony, the strange friendships forged in proximity and boredom. She told him about her life, the teaching, the town, the cat who still didn't like her. They didn't talk about the past. It was a wound neither of them wanted to reopen. But they talked about everything else. The weather, memory, the way time moved differently when you knew it was running out. "Do you believe in heaven?" she asked him once. "No. What do you believe in?" "I used to believe in nothing," he said. "Now I believe in this. These calls. This moment. You. That's not enough. It's all we have." He wasn't wrong. 6 weeks before he died, she made a decision. She called Sharon Delgado. "I want to see him. In person." "Yes. That's complicated. You're not family. You'd need to be on his visitor list. Can you make that happen?" There was a pause. "I can try." Took 2 weeks. 2 weeks of paperwork and background checks and bureaucratic nightmares. But finally Sharon called back. "You're approved. You can visit him next Saturday." The prison was gray, cold, institutional in the way places designed to erase humanity always are. Maya sat in the visiting room, her hands shaking, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. And then the door opened. He walked in slowly, flanked by a guard. He had lost weight. His skin had a grayish pallor. But his eyes were the same. They locked onto hers, and the world disappeared. He sat across from her. The table between them, a chasm neither of them could cross. "Hi," she said, her voice trembling. "Hi." They stared at each other, and Maya felt 4 years of grief and longing and love crash over her all at once. "You came," he said softly. "Of course I came. I didn't think you would. I had to see you. One more time." His eyes shimmered. "One more time." They couldn't touch. The rules were clear. But she reached across the table anyway, her hand stopping just short of his. He mirrored the gesture, his fingers a breath away from hers. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "For all of it." "I'm not," he said. "Not for loving you. Never for that." A tear slid down her cheek. "You should be." "Why?" "Because I ruined you." "No," he said firmly. "You saved me. For a little while. You made me feel like I was more than what they said I was. You were. You are. Because you saw me." His voice cracked. "You saw me, Maya. And you stayed. Even when you shouldn't have. I left. But you stayed first. That's what matters." She broke up. Let the grief pour out of her in waves. The guard cleared his throat. "Time's almost up." "No," she gasped. "Please." But Mateo smiled. Resigned. "It's okay. It's not. It never was." He looked at her one last time, his gaze full of everything they had never said. "Thank you, Maya." "For what?" "For being my one true thing." The guard touched his shoulder. He stood. He stood. And as they led him away, she said the only words that mattered. "I love you." He stopped, turned. His eyes met hers. "I know." And then he was gone. He died 3 weeks later. Sharon called to tell her. Said it had been peaceful. That he had been unconscious at the end. She didn't cry. She had no tears left. She just sat in her house, staring at the wall, and felt the absence of him settle into her bones. A month after he died, a package arrived. Inside was a letter. And a book. The letter was short. Written in his careful handwriting. "Maya, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I asked Sharon to send this after. Hope that's okay. I don't have much to leave. But I wanted you to have this. It's the book I was reading the first time I saw you. I never finished it. I think I was waiting. You asked me once what I believed in. Believe in you. In the way you looked at me. In the way you stayed even when you were leaving. I believe that love, even the kind that destroys, is worth it. Thank you for being mine. Mateo." She held the letter to her chest and wept. Then she opened the book. Inside on the first page, he had written one more line. "Some loves survive even the ending." Years passed. Maya stayed in the small town. Kept teaching. Kept living. But she was different now. Quieter. Softer. The guilt had shifted into something else. Something that looked like forgiveness, though she wasn't sure if it was his or hers. She kept the book on her nightstand. Read it slowly, a few pages at a time, as if finishing it would mean losing him all over again. And sometimes late at night, she would think about that cafe in Guadalajara. The way the light had fallen. The way he had looked at her and seen something worth knowing. She had been sent to destroy him. But in the end he had saved her. Not from the guilt. Not from the grief. But from the lie that love had to be pure to be real. Didn't. Just had to be true. And theirs, broken, doomed, impossible, had been the truest thing she ever knew. 5 years after Mateo died, Maya received a second letter. It arrived on a Thursday in October, the kind of crisp autumn day that felt borrowed from a better life. She found it in her mailbox wedged between a utility bill and a grocery store flyer, a thick manila envelope with a law firm's return address embossed in the corner. Delgado and Associates. Her hands went cold. She carried it inside, set it on the kitchen table, and stared at it for 20 minutes before she found the courage to open it. Inside was a letter from Sharon Delgado, typed on official letterhead, and beneath it, a smaller envelope, sealed. Her name written on the front in handwriting she would have recognized anywhere. Her heart stopped. She read Sharon's letter first, her hands shaking. "Dear Ms. Jenkins, I apologize for the delay in sending this correspondence. Per Mr. Ibarra's instructions, I was to hold this letter for 5 years following his death before forwarding it to you. That period has now elapsed. Additionally, I have been instructed to inform you that Mr. Ibarra established a trust prior to his incarceration. You are named as a beneficiary. The details are enclosed. Please contact my office at your earliest convenience to discuss the distribution. With regards, Sharon Delgado Esq. Maya's vision blurred. She set the letter down and picked up the smaller envelope with trembling fingers. She opened it carefully, as if it might disintegrate. Inside were 3 handwritten pages. His handwriting. His words. She began to read. Maya, if Sharon followed my instructions, 5 years have passed since I died. I chose 5 years deliberately. Long enough for the sharpest edges of grief to dull. Long enough for you to have built something new. Not long enough for you to forget. I'm hoping you're happy. Or at least closer to it than you were. There are things I need to tell you. Things I couldn't say while I was alive because I was afraid they would hurt you more than help. But I'm gone now, and the dead have nothing left to lose. First, I knew who you were before that night you tried to leave. I'd known for 2 months. One of my people saw you meeting with someone. A man who turned out to be your handler. They followed you. Took photographs. Brought me everything. Your real name. Your history. Your assignment. I could have killed you. Should have, probably, by the logic of the life I was living. But I couldn't. Because by then, I had already fallen in love with you. So I made a choice. I chose to let you keep lying. I chose to pretend I didn't know. Because the Maya you were pretending to be was the only version of yourself you were willing to show me. And I wanted whatever piece of you I could have, even if it wasn't real. Except it was real. That's what you never understood. The woman who held my hand in that living room, she was real. The woman who laughed at my terrible jokes, she was real. The woman who stayed when she should have run, she was real. You were always real, Maya. The lie was just the costume you wore to feel safe. Second, I let them take me. I knew the raid was coming. I had sources. I could have disappeared. Mexico, South America, somewhere they'd never find me. But I didn't. Because leaving would have meant you spent the rest of your life believing you destroyed me. I couldn't let you carry that. So I stayed. I let them come. And when they put the cuffs on, I was thinking about you. About the way you looked in my kitchen. About the way your hand felt in mine. It was worth it. Third, I'm leaving you money. I know you won't want it. I know it will feel like blood money, like something tainted. But it's not. It's clean. Legitimate. Money I set aside years before I met you. Investments. Property. Things that were never touched by the life that put me in prison. Sharon has the details. It's enough to change your life if you let it. I'm not asking you to take it because you owe me. Don't. I'm asking you to take it because I want you to have the freedom I never did. The freedom to choose what kind of life you want. To stop running. To stop punishing yourself. You think loving me was your greatest sin. I think it was your greatest act of courage. Use the money, Maya. Build something beautiful. Live the life I couldn't give you. And please, please, stop carrying me like a wound. I died loving you. I died grateful. I died knowing that for a brief, impossible moment, I was someone's whole world. That's more than most people get. Be happy. Not for me. For you. You deserve it. Yours always, Mateo. Maya read the letter 3 times. Then she folded it carefully, pressed it to her chest, and cried until there was nothing left. She called Sharon Delgado the next day. I received the letter. I thought you might. Sharon's voice was kind. Professional but not cold. Would you like to discuss the trust? How much is it? Approximately $2.3 million. Maya sat down hard. That's a considerable sum. Yes. I don't want it. Ms. Jenkins. I can't take his money. I can't. With respect, Sharon interrupted gently. It's not his money anymore. It's yours. He made that choice years ago. You can refuse it, certainly. But it won't change what he wanted for you. Maya closed her eyes. What am I supposed to do with it? Whatever you want. That's the point. She didn't touch the money for 6 months. It sat in the account Sharon had set up, accruing interest, while Maya went through her days on autopilot. Teaching. Grading. Existing. But Mateo's words haunted her. Stop carrying me like a wound. Build something beautiful. She started small. First she paid off her student loans. Then her car. Then she put a down payment on the house she had been renting, the one with the porch and the overgrown garden and the view of the mountains in the distance. It felt like exhaling after holding her breath for a decade. Next, she donated $50,000 to a prison reform organization. Anonymous. Untraceable. It wouldn't bring him back. Wouldn't undo what had been done. But it felt like something. And then one night, sitting on her porch with a glass of wine and the weight of all that unspent money pressing on her chest, she had an idea. Took a year to set up. She called it the Ibarra Foundation, though she registered it under a generic name to avoid questions. Its mission was simple: provide resources, education, and support for the children and families of incarcerated individuals. Scholarships, counseling, legal aid, housing assistance. The things that could have saved someone like Mateo before he became the man people feared. She hired a small staff, rented an office, partnered with non-profits across the country. She didn't run it herself, she didn't have the expertise, but she funded it, guided it, made sure every dollar went where it was supposed to. And slowly, quietly, the foundation grew. 3 years after she received the letter, Maya got a phone call from a woman named Carmen. "Ms. Jenkins. My name is Carmen Ibarra. I'm calling because I think you knew my brother, Mateo." Maya's blood went cold. "Yes, I knew him. I thought so." Carmen's voice was soft, uncertain. "I found your name in some of his papers. Letters he never sent. I wasn't sure if I should reach out, but I wanted to thank you. Thank me. For the foundation. I know it's yours. Sharon told me." Maya closed her eyes. She shouldn't have. "I'm glad she did. What you're doing, it's what he would have wanted. It's what he always wanted, actually. Before everything got so complicated. I didn't know he had a sister. We hadn't spoken in years. Not since he went to prison. I was angry. Shame. I thought cutting him off would protect my own family." Carmen's voice cracked. "But when he died, I realized I'd wasted all that time. And I couldn't get it back." Maya understood that feeling intimately. "He loved you," she said quietly. "I know. And he loved you." Carmen paused. "He wrote about you. Not much. But enough that I could tell. You made him happy. At the end. I destroyed him." "No," Carmen said firmly. "Life destroyed him. You just gave him a reason to survive it." Carmen became a donor. Then a board member. Then a friend. She was a teacher too, high school English in Guadalajara. She had Mateo's eyes. His quiet intensity. But she smiled more easily, laughed more freely. She had escaped the weight that had crushed him. They met in person 6 months after that first phone call. Carmen flew to North Carolina, and they spent a weekend talking. About Mateo. About the foundation. About the different ways people carried grief. "He made mistakes," Carmen said over coffee. "Big ones. I won't pretend he didn't. But he wasn't a monster. He was just trapped. By choices. By circumstances. By a world that didn't give him many options." "I know," Maya said. "Do you?" Carmen looked at her intently. "Because I think you still blame yourself. For all of it. I was sent to destroy him. And he let you. That was his choice. Not yours. It doesn't feel that way." "I know." Carmen reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "But maybe it's time to let it." On the 10th anniversary of Mateo's death, Maya did something she had never done before. She went back to Guadalajara. She hadn't planned it. But Carmen invited her to visit, and something in Maya finally broke open enough to say yes. The city had changed, grown. But the cafe was still there, the one where they had first spoken. Had new owners now. Different decor. But the light still fell through the windows the same way. Maya sat at a table by the window and ordered coffee she didn't drink. She thought about the woman she had been 10 years ago. The lies she had told. The person she had pretended to be. She thought about Mateo, about the way he had looked at her like she mattered. like she was worth knowing. And for the first time in a decade, she didn't feel the crushing weight of guilt. She felt something else. Gratitude. Not for the way it had ended, but for the fact that it had happened at all. She had loved him. He had loved her. And that love, messy, doomed, impossible, had changed them both. Had cost everything. But it had also given her something she had spent her whole life searching for. The permission to be real. That night, Carmen took her to Mateo's grave. It was in a small cemetery on the outskirts of the city, shaded by jacaranda trees. His headstone was simple. Just his name and dates. No epitaph. Maya knelt in front of it, her fingers tracing the letters carved into the stone. "I did what you asked," she whispered. "I built something. I'm trying to be happy." The wind moved through the trees, carrying the scent of flowers. "I still love you. Probably always will. But I'm not carrying you like a wound anymore." Her voice cracked. "I'm carrying you like a gift." She stayed there until the sun set, talking to him in the quiet spaces between words. Telling him about the foundation. About Carmen. About the life she had built from the ruins of who they had been. And when she finally stood to leave, she felt lighter. Not free. Not absolved. But forgiven. By him. And maybe, finally, by herself. Maya Jenkins lived another 30 years. She never married. Never stopped teaching. Never stopped running the foundation that bore his name in everything but title. She dated occasionally. Loved carefully. Let people in slowly, cautiously, like someone who had learned the hard way that intimacy was dangerous. But she didn't close herself off. Didn't build walls so high no one could reach her. She let herself be known. And she let herself remember. Not with grief. Not with regret. But with the bittersweet knowledge that some loves are not meant to last. That some people come into your life not to stay but to change you. Mateo had changed her. He had taught her that love didn't have to be perfect to be real. That forgiveness was something you gave yourself. That the worst thing you ever did could also be the thing that saved you. And in the end that was enough. When Maya died, quietly in her sleep at the age of 73, they found a letter on her nightstand. It was addressed to no one. Or maybe to everyone. It read, "I was sent to destroy him. But he saved me instead. Not from the consequences. Not from the guilt. But from the lie that I was nothing more than what I had done. He saw me. And he loved me anyway. That was the gift. That was everything." Beside the letter was a book. Worn. We'll read. The pages soft from years of turning. Inside, on the first page, in handwriting that had faded but never disappeared, were the words, "Some loves survive even the ending." And they had. In the foundation that bore his name. In the lives they had changed. In the quiet, stubborn truth that love, even the kind that destroys, can also heal. Not perfectly. Not completely. But enough. Always enough.